Hi, this is photographer John Sexton speaking to you from my home and studio in Carmel Valley, California. I'm sorry I can't be with you in person to celebrate this exhibition of Kenny Rogers photography at the Booth Museum. First, I want to thank Seth Hopkins and his team for inviting me to be a small part of this special event. I also want to thank Bernie Boudreau, Kenny's photographic creative director, for his help with this presentation. I'm hoping I can share some insights about Kenny and his photography based on a special friendship we shared for more than 35 years. Our friendship grew out of a unique event. I was Kenny Rogers' Christmas gift in 1984. Actually, the gift was a private photography workshop for Kenny. The gift was from Kenny's wife at the time, Mary Ann, that evolved from an idea first conceived by a mutual friend and photographer, Edwina Johnson. When Edwina first proposed the idea of a private workshop for Kenny, I was a bit concerned about how serious he was about his photography. My worries vanished following a phone call and Kenny sending me some of his photographic prints that he had made in his own darkroom. A few days before Christmas, I arrived at Kenny and Mary Ann's Beverly Hills home in the morning. After greetings, we headed directly to his darkroom to begin the workshop. Along with Kenny, his friend, tennis pro, producer, and photographic companion, Kelly Junkerman, also participated. When I entered the darkroom, I found that there were some things that really needed to be cleaned up and organized before we could begin the workshop session. Kenny and Kelly were surprised the first task would be some housekeeping, but they were willing and eager to do anything I suggested, and for about an hour the three of us scrubbed, cleaned, and organized the lab. After that, we began to explore the techniques and magic of the process of making silver gelatin photographic prints in the darkroom. Kenny was extremely excited, passionate, and enthusiastic. Each day of the workshop was intense and long, lasting at least 18 hours. Most of that time was spent in the darkroom, but I also had offered instruction in the use of the large format 4x5-inch view camera, as well as Ansel Adams' zone system of exposure and development. At the end of our workshop session, Kenny begged me to stay for an additional day, but I explained I needed to get to my father's house for Christmas. Kenny reluctantly said he understood. After experiencing Kenny's extreme enthusiasm and getting a peek into his lifestyle, I suggested that a large format view camera, which is a time-consuming and contemplative device to use, might not be the best choice for him. I suggested that maybe he should consider sticking with his more agile, medium format Hasselblad camera system. I think Kenny took my suggestion as a challenge. A few days after Christmas, I received an unexpected phone call from him. From his initial greeting, I could hear the excitement in his voice. He told me he and Mary Ann had attended a Christmas church service, and he had spent the time visualizing the photographic possibilities of the church interior. He returned with his 4x5-inch view camera and made a photograph of the interior. He had just printed it and was sending it to me via Federal Express, along with the negative, for my review and commentary. This was the very first large format photograph that Kenny had made completely on his own, and he was anxious to have me see it. The image is included in the exhibition. It is Church Interior, Los Angeles, California, and you will see that he did a skillful job visualizing, exposing, and printing the image. My new friend, an enthusiastic photography student, was off and running. Over the years, Kenny often described himself as impulsive obsessive. In other words, he impulsively got involved with something and then became totally obsessed with it. And that was certainly the case with his pursuit of photography. I realized how obsessed Kenny was with photography when I received another unexpected phone call from him about 2 weeks later. He was on a nationwide concert tour with Dolly Parton, and they were heading to the Pacific Northwest. He had the idea that we could photograph snow-covered mountains and spectacular landscapes during the day while he and Dolly performed at night. We would move on from one locale to the next as the tour progressed. It sounded like a great idea to me. As we were preparing for the trip, Kenny asked me if I had ever attended one of his concerts. I was embarrassed to say that I had not. His reply to me, which was typical of Kenny's modesty and sense of humor, was, "I wouldn't know if I didn't get paid." Our first stop on this trip was Vancouver, British Columbia. While Dolly was performing on stage, unbeknownst to the many thousands in the arena, Kenny and I were working together beneath the seats, reviewing the controls of his 4x5-inch view camera. Kenny's road manager had to drag Kenny to his dressing room so he could take the stage just in the nick of time. The next morning, we left the hotel before first light. Normally, I would be driving to a photographic location. But with Kenny, we rented a helicopter and off we went exploring. It was a memorable and beautiful day. We photographed along the coast and then flew into the snowy mountains. The next tour stop was the Tacoma Dome near Seattle, Washington, and we were off for another exciting helicopter photography adventure, flying among the snow-capped peaks of the Cascade Mountains. Along with Kenny and me, and the pilot, were Kelly Junkerman and Rob Pincus, Kenny's security person. Kenny made several photographs on that trip that were included in his first book, Kenny Rogers America. At some point during the day, Kenny got the idea that we could fly back to Los Angeles immediately after the concert and process the exposed film from the past couple of days. He made a proposal to the helicopter pilot that he and his entire family could have complimentary front row seats for the concert if he would be willing to fly us from the arena to Kenny's jet at SeaTac Airport. Since I knew the concert set list, I sat next to the pilot and gave him the high sign when Kenny and Dolly began their final duet prior to their inevitable encore. We went out to the chopper, he spun up the engine, and radioed for takeoff clearance. Moments later, Kenny, Kelly, and Rob burst out of the Tacoma Dome and ran at full tilt to the waiting chopper. As soon as they were on board, we were airborne. The helicopter pilot radioed to Kenny's jet pilots at the airport. They spun up the jet's engines and got clearance. We landed right next to Kenny's plane, hopped on board, and began to taxi immediately. It wasn't long before we were processing negatives in Kenny's darkroom in Beverly Hills. We worked until the wee hours of the morning and got very little sleep as we were up early the next morning making contact proof prints of the brand new negatives. That was photography Kenny Rogers style in 1985. Kenny was an eager and hungry student. When we were flying on his plane, conversations often evolved into photographic discussions and educational opportunities. It was an intense schedule where we lived, breathed, but seldom slept photography. Early in my photographic career, I had the opportunity to study with, and later work for, noted photographer Ansel Adams. My photography was influenced by Ansel, as was my teaching style. With Ansel, you received information, but also inspiration. It was that combination that I tried to share with Kenny. The progress he made with his photographic growth was most impressive. When we were together, there was a typical routine. Kenny and Dolly would perform a concert at night. We would fly to the next venue, or if it was less than a 2-hour flight, we'd return to Kenny's home. If that was the case, we'd work in the darkroom, usually until 3 a.m. or later, grab a little sleep, then we'd be up early and out photographing or back into the darkroom making prints. If at home, afternoons would be spent mounting, matting, and finishing Kenny's new prints. Then it was time to fly to the next concert venue. Together we explored locations in the beautiful mountains and canyons of the desert Southwest, incredible landscapes in Wyoming, along with a number of trips in the San Francisco Bay Area. I clearly remember the day when Kenny made the Martins Beach Half Moon Bay photograph included in the exhibit. Long before sunrise, Rob and I were filling our ice chest in preparation for a full day of photographic wanderings. Kenny came out in the hall and quietly scolded us for making so much noise. We couldn't have been any quieter. Kenny suggested, Next time, use an ice machine on a different floor. We explored California's beautiful Central Coast, photographing coastal rocks, surf, and redwoods. And of course, there were many photographic trips in beautiful Georgia. In February of that year, I made my first trip to Colbert, Georgia, to visit Kenny and Mary Ann at their Beaver Dam farms. I'm not sure who came up with the idea, but we decided to take a camping trip to North Georgia up in Rabun County. We were quite the ragtag group. There was Kenny, of course, Bob Shainbrook, my friend from Kodak, Kelly Junkerman, Rob Pincus, as well as Kenny and Mary Ann's close friend, Morris Bullock, and me. Morris organized the trip and selected the location. We camped in a remote backwoods area where there were beautiful streams and wonderful waterfalls to photograph, as well as vistas looking off to receding ridges into North Carolina. We brought along an odd collection of recently purchased camping equipment and even an 8-foot folding table. However, in the chaos of packing, we forgot one important item: a pot for cooking our food. So the camp coffee pot served as the cooking vessel for our fine cuisine of hot dogs. I shared with Kenny the magical quality of what I like to call quiet light, photographing after sunset and making long exposures. We photographed until it was dark, then began heading back to our remote campsite. Kelly and Morris went directly to camp to get the fire going, while Kenny, Rob, Bob, and I went to a small grocery store to buy provisions. I have many fond memories of adventures and misadventures I shared with my friend Kenny over the years. Preparing this presentation brought many of those memories back into clarity. Kenny's skills as a photographer and printmaker continued to improve. At a certain time, it was time for me to push Kenny out of our photographic nest so he could soar on his own, and that he did. Kenny then began what I think is his strongest body of work, his portraits, a number of which are included in the exhibition. Like many photographers, Kenny evolved into the digital age, and his fascination with photography continued. In 2014, Kenny received an honorary Master of Photography degree from the Professional Photographers of America at their national convention. This is their highest honor. I was presenting a lecture at the same convention and also receiving an award. Kenny and his lovely wife Wanda arrived a day early to attend my presentation. Kenny introduced me at my lecture. When I took the stage, I joked that this would be the only time I would ever have Kenny Rogers as an opening act. The audience, including Kenny, reacted with boisterous laughter, just as I hoped. A few years back, I received a note from Kenny where he wrote, "I miss our 18-hour days." I miss those days too, but mostly I miss having Kenny as a friend. Many of Kenny's most memorable and popular songs are the ones where he told a story. His unique voice and gifted performances brought listeners into the song to be a part of that story. Kenny's best photographs also invite us in to visually listen to his story. His photographs celebrate his pursuit of beauty. I often say that photography reveals not only that which is in front of the camera, but also that which is behind the camera, the photographer. So each of the images included in this exhibition is a small piece of a mosaic self-portrait of the man, Kenny Rogers. I hope that you will look and listen to these prints and accept Kenny's invitation to hear his story and be moved by his love of the subject, love of life, and love of photography. Thank you very much and enjoy the exhibition.